Trapped by the belief that I'm not good enough, bound by the limitations and the lies that consumed my world, this was me. It wasn't until I took the biggest leap in my life to know and trust the power within. And it was at that moment I made a choice. My past will not define me anymore. Hello, I am Teri, and I know I am not alone in this. Over the years, I have found that the number one mistake that we make is that we get in the way of our own success story. Yes, I said it. On this show, together we'll tackle limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, getting stuck, fear, doubt, overwhelm, and the imposter syndrome. Join us on this journey designed to transport you beyond your limitations to a world where anything is possible. This is Talking with Teri. Hi, and welcome back to Talking with Teri, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And I am so delighted to have Jocelyn Bellows with us today. She is the Breakdown to Wake Up coach, TV host, author, and podcast host. So welcome, Jocelyn, to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So I was telling you earlier that I love coming into these conversations really like almost blind. So if I don't already know the guest, I'm beaming with curiosity to just learn more about you. So for those that do not know and I don't know you either. So I'd love to hear more about you and how you came to be where you're at. So just share with us a little backstory to bring us up to current time.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to take a moment though, Teri. I'm very much in the same boat as you are when it comes to both the TV show and the podcast. I think the first season, I was very intuitive about, I was really focusing on pulling in people that I wanted to be on the show.
Yeah.
People that I knew or that I had followed on social media for a period of time. And now transition, it's really kind of fun to continue to expand my world and get to meet new people through those mediums, and allow them an opportunity to share their platform and share what they're up to. So I'm in the same boat. I love this continuous ability to expand my world.
I know it is. And I have found that there's so much like juicy conversations that come out of it. And literally I've created friendships. And I'm going to someone's wedding after like being on her podcast, and she's being on my podcast, and she invited me to her wedding. So I'm going to her wedding. So I feel like I'm kind of crashing her wedding. But we just became instant fast friends. So I just love it. I love the possibilities that this opens up.
That might transition me really well into a little bit of why I do what I do.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because Teri, you're like, I'm in the same boat, right? I've been so fortunate to have created an opportunity for me to meet people, not just like in our backyard. So as we discovered, we're in each other's backyard, which is like unusual. I'm like, oh, talking to someone in Colorado in my time zone? What's that about?
I love it.
But, I've had this opportunity I've connected with people in across Europe and Australia and across the US and Canada and now South America. I haven't touched too much in Africa or the Middle East yet or Asia, but that there's time.
There's time. Yes, always time.
What was really amazing though is the book. Let's start with the authorship. So I had a call with a woman that I met through similar how you and I connected through I think a podcast platform with the intent of exchanging podcasts. And in our second conversation, in the first conversation, I invited her to speak on a panel that I was literally creating as the words were coming out of my mouth. I just got this like moment.
I love it.
This person is going to be in my world.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. The second conversation was, oh, and Jocelyn, this is your book, right? And I was like, no, are you sure? So here it's developed into this friendship that she's in Brazil, I'm here in the US. I did end up working with her, and in 3 months later, I published my first book.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. And it was just all about like being open to what showed up for me, right? I knew at some point I was going to write a book. I can tell you that was how I sought to show up. And really when I talk about the 3 months, it was me sprouting with my idea. Like I had the idea, I knew what I wanted. And then I had 15 authors join me from 5 continents, and it happened that fast. And I actually ended up turning away about 10 authors that wanted to be a part of the book at the end, because it was just like, this is the capacity of which I'm going to want to keep this container.
I love that you're sharing this. And again, I love how these conversations just like get
Wow.
created, right? They evolve. But I think it's so brilliant because what you're talking about is like you're being open to that download, that download, that idea, that thought, and sometimes we don't even know where they come from. It feels like it's coming from outside of us. And it feels like, it can be kind of scary at the same time, but it's like there's like this energy that you cannot shut off. And what I find so powerful when I'm working with my clients is like, that's that energy, that vibration is put us into this new vibrational alignment. And now we're attracting this, right? And when we're following it and we're following the energy of it, we're staying in the energy of it, it doesn't require much for it to fall into place. Like it doesn't require much. I think how I came about with my podcast, like I was telling someone the other day, I know there was no, I had I've never put on my bucket list or my target list that I would like to do a podcast. And then last year, again, it was like, and like things fell within 60 days. I went from nothing to having a podcast to having local celebrities to national celebrities on my show within within 2 months. Powerful, right? So when
Right.
you're in that zone, right, of being in allowance of receiving and just knowing and trusting. So I'm curious, like, was there something in that time that says, okay, I just am being guided to this. I'm just trusting this. Like, what was that in that moment that just allowed you permission to do that? Because I think sometimes it's easier for some people, harder for others.
Yeah. Well, I want to actually go back to my podcast as well, because
Yeah.
similar to you, I also had, and similar to the book, I had a download with that as well. So here in Colorado and here in Denver, the Denver area, we have something called Startup Week in September of every year. And it's, I think, going into 11, 12 years now.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I spoke at it last year. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That is a bucket list for me.
Oh,
so we will talk about that offline.
Yes, too.
For sure. So we have this wonderful, amazing thing called Denver Startup Week. And it's, the whole week is catered to entrepreneurs on how to grow, scale, and enliven their business, how to pitch themselves, the whole nine, right? And as an entrepreneur, I was like, oh my gosh, the first time I attended it 2 years ago was the best week ever in my entire life. And I walked out of that week. And I remember that Saturday, I went for a long drive out to a place called Hanging Lake, which is about 2 hours west.
I love that place. It's my top two mountains places in Colorado. So
we're definitely gonna be chatting for.
I know. Oh my gosh! All right.
So on the drive, a song came on the radio called "This Is Me" by Kesha, and at the time it was sort of my anthem. And I am listening to it, and my channels were so open at that moment. And I remember like a lightning bolt. A lightning bolt was like, you're going to have a podcast. You're going to start this podcast. And mind you, 2 weeks earlier, I had met somebody through a dating app that we ended up never really dating. But I listened to him like 3 or 4 of his shows, and I was like, this is amazing. To me, like 2 weeks later, I'm going to start a podcast. And the download was, this is the name of the show. This is what I'm going to talk. Who are the audience I want to talk to? The guests I want on the show. I had 20 people I was going to ask, and I was ready to go within like an hour of me driving. And it was just a total download. And I was like, and then I got home, and then I froze, and then I freaked out. Right? It took me 3 weeks to buy my first mic.
Understandable. Yes.
Yeah. 3 weeks to ask.
The brain wants to stay in that comfort zone, and it's totally creepy, and it's scary, and it's terrifying. But good for you for persevering.
And I did, and I just did. And then I asked my first couple guests, and they said yes. And then I recorded the first 2, and I was like, and I listened to the first 2, and I was like, wow, I sound pretty good. And this is from a woman that doesn't like hearing her voice when she hears her voice, right? Preach. We've all been there.
I hear it.
It's similar to side note, I'll come back. I'm also a triathlete, a novice triathlete. And the first triathlon I went into, like, I was excited about the swim, right? That was the piece I liked the most of it. I go into the convention, and it happened to be like there was someone on stage, and the question was being asked, how many of you are terrified of the swim? Like 3/4 of those hands went up, and I'm like, crap! That was the piece I was looking forward to. So when I come back to it, is like I didn't recognize a joy within me. And when I finally took those steps through like perceive fear, and feeling the joy and the excitement and love for this, I was like, there's no stopping me now, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, and then I went through the entire list. I asked everybody that was on that list whether, and it through all sorts of amazing ways, like really directly, or people that literally like, I had a person that I wanted to ask that I met at Startup Week, and I was like, someday I will ask him, right? One day I will. I went to go speak at a panel downtown in downtown Denver one day, and I didn't know this guy's. I couldn't remember the guy's last name. I didn't know how I was going to find him. Guess who's sitting in like the waiting area by himself? So I walk
Oh my
up to him. Didn't know him. I was like, hey,
yeah.
look, he's on the show. And he showed not like 2 weeks later, he was at my house recording with me, not online. So
Yes.
anyway, that what I want to illustrate there is that I had the download for the show and I had so much fun with it for the podcast that when it came time for the book, it was like a no-brainer. It was like, of
Yeah.
course it's going to happen. I
Yeah.
don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And the same thing
And
happened with
I
TV
think
shows.
that's really important. So when we get those downloads, right? Don't dismiss them. Like there's an energy, there's a vibration, and I truly believe that I don't know. This is going to sound weird, but I feel like we have all these like thoughts that are just like percolating up here, like in this like abyss space, right?
Yes.
And when we have one of these that downloads, it's like, oh, we're gonna pick her. She seems like she would follow through with this. Let me give it to her. And if we take it, we run with it. It's like the best gift ever, and it becomes easy. It's terrifying. I'm not gonna dismiss the terror that it requires to like go through that kind of almost like you're breaking through that barrier. It's breaking through that, you know, that barrier that we have that says, this is comfort, this is not comfortable. And but I promise you, and I hope that what you're taking from this conversation right now as you're listening to Jocelyn is saying, gosh, it was so amazing. Like, yes, there was a little bit of pain in the beginning, but once I stepped through that, all this other stuff happened. And as a result of that, another thing, another thing, another thing. And now it's like you're just on this, you know, train track of really awesomeness that's happening. Right. So I think, you know, if you're having those downloads, trust it, listen to it, play with it, do something about it, take action, take some inspired
Take
action to do
inspired
it.
action.
Take inspired action to it.
That's
And you know, as my husband would always say to me, like when I was taking some big leaps in the beginning of my career, he always said to me, and I just it's always there in the back of my head because it's a good reminder for me. He said to me that, and this really life-changing moment in my life, he said, Teri, what's the worst that could happen? You fall on your face and you go get another job. And I'm like, that's like when I mean, and of course I was in the moment. So of course I couldn't see that as an option. Right. But I'm like, you're right. When we simplify it, like what's the worst that could happen? Are we willing to live with that? And if so, let's go for it. Right. So,
yeah.
and so,
I want to stay on that moment too,
yeah.
about the failure, because this is a piece I think that really is a reason why people don't even go for it to begin with, right? We give up on ourselves before we even take the opportunity to take that leap, which by the way is the name of my podcast, which you actually didn't know because I didn't put that in my show notes.
I know. So here we are. When am I showing up on your podcast?
Huh?
I said,
we're going to be talking about that too. I've already, the things that are spinning in my back of my head right now is just, I'm like, stay focused, Jocelyn.
Oh my gosh, stay focused. Okay.
Yeah, but it's like, but the
piece people are feeling this energy. Like, I don't know about, I'm like jazz. Like, I'm like, let's go. Like, I hope that people, when they listen to this, they just take away, even if they take away nothing from content, I hope they just take away the energy of this conversation because this is just juicy.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I do too. And this is how, I mean, I will tell you, I don't show up this way with every show, right? I'm sure you've been on other podcasts and you're a speaker and you do other things too. And as do I. And there's sometimes there's like, it hits and you're like, yep, you're on point. And there are moments and there are days that you're not. And I want to say that to that point, like forgive yourself. Don't hold that. Like if you're just not on, you're not on. It happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just how it goes. And rather than like sitting and perseverating and beating yourself up over it, what does that actually do? It doesn't, it actually takes away from your ability to be present with the joy and the peace of it. I'm not saying don't like dismiss it, like acknowledge it for what it is, give it a voice, process it, and move through it.
Yeah. So let's go back into that fear place because we were
Yeah,
talking about like, some people have a really hard time and I think that's based on our programming, right? It's
for sure.
based on our previous, challenges, barriers and blocks and evidence. Like I talk a lot about having evidence and, some people have and I come from the same boat, so I know that. I had years of programming that was not serving me in the greatest and highest good. And
Mhm.
so it required my own work to be able to undo and recreate that new story that was more in alignment. And so, share a little bit more about that piece where people get trapped in that place of fear.
Yeah. And that's totally, well, that's the work that I do, right?
Yeah.
That like one of my signature programs is called Break Through Your BS.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where we start, where we actually start is one of the first exercises I do is called a values-based exercise. And we go to what I actually ask of people to do. So this might be a takeaway if you guys want to go and play on this on your own. Is I ask the group to write down like the top 5 people that they most admire in their life and why they admire them. And when you do that, you're going to start to see that there's a pattern of adjectives, of descriptors of why you admire certain people in your life. So when you take that and you say, okay, well, speaks her truth, no matter what the consequences are. And I kind of that's a long-winded piece. Or speaks with integrity. Maybe that's it, their integrity. And if you see integrity coming 3 or 4 times in that descriptor, the likelihood is either one, you show up that way and you don't see it for yourself because we tend to not see our own best, the highest and best. We have a lot
Right.
of awareness, but around our negativity.
Yeah.
Second is that if it's not that you're showing up that way, if it's that that's a quality that you see in others that you want to exemplify for yourself. So
Right.
now you have an awareness, right? And then we do a top 10 list with the top 10 adjectives that you like, values that you think are yours that you want to live into. And then we define them for ourselves. So we don't define them by Webster's dictionary. It's like defining ourselves of how we actually want to show up in the world.
Yeah.
That's your values roadmap. That's like the place of where that with that. And truthfully, and I won't reach you because I'll be off camera, but it's mine is literally right off camera for me. So that
Yeah.
if I have a moment where I'm going to make a decision, a big decision or a small decision, I'm like, oh, is that alignment? Is that alignment with my value? Am I showing up in that way? Because the
Yeah.
moment that we show up outside of that, we're allowing ourselves to play small.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's part of that breaking through our own BS.
Yeah.
It's
And I
just
think
like
that's
one piece of the new storyline.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful. And I had another guest on here. We broke it down and we talked about those values. And I think if you have not done this exercise, this is another opportunity to really look at what are those values that you hold true,
Mhm.
and don't go crazy with them. Just, top
Yes.
five values. And that can be overarching for life and business.
Mhm.
But how are you showing up and making choices, right, around those things because opportunities will come all the time.
Yeah.
And this is a great guideline for people to really be okay. Is this in alignment with me? Is this not? And you can feel the difference once you start playing being in alignment. As soon as you're
Yeah.
not in alignment, you can feel it. You can actually say, "Oh, there's something going on. Let me go back and look at where I'm at, and is this resonating with me still because I think so often I see entrepreneurs get trapped in saying yes, 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 instead of saying yes to what means yes and no to what means no, and
Yes.
really being clear on who they're serving, what they're doing, what's their purpose, what's their passion and staying in alignment. Because if we say yes to everything, I promise you at some point it will start to tear you down because it's going to say this is not in alignment with me anymore and it's going to make it difficult in that situation and bring about you know
It takes you
different
off course.
challenges. Yeah,
It takes
yeah,
you
it
off
gets
course.
worse and it brings on different challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not, and we certainly don't want to say not to be open to new challenges and new growth, but it
Right.
again that having that guideline. So like I don't know if you're familiar, if you've read the book Good to Great.
Oh
Maybe
yeah. Oh yeah,
yeah.
with
Jim Collins.
Jim Collins. I was like, what is his
And
name?
which also he happens to, I believe he lives in Boulder these days.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
also, I don't know, maybe he's always been in Boulder, but I'm pretty sure he's up in Boulder. So also a Colorado native or a Colorado guy. But one of the concepts he talks about is your hedgehog. So it's like you have your central point of which you're going to operate. So if, like, for me, a big proponent for me is for people to tell their story, right? Breaking through their BS of what other people thought their story was meant to be, to actually now telling their narrative through spoken word and through written word, right?
Yeah.
But it's really about getting to the core of who they are, breaking away all the muck and all the other stuff that we have absorbed as our own. So as long as I'm in alignment with that, from that core purpose, and that people are showing up to tell their story in a way that is empowering for them so that they get to step into their light, I'm in alignment. As long as I'm also staying integrity to my values, I'm speaking authentically with them. And if they, if that person, if I'm in a way, showing up in a way that person isn't receiving me and says, oh no, this isn't, this person is not, like, I say one thing, this person says, I'm not really that interested in how you're showing up. Well, then I have to let it go. Like, that person's no longer meant to work with me or be in my sphere. And that's okay. That comes to the piece of being really centered in who you are and knowing who you are as an individual. And I know at the beginning, like, before we got on the conversation, before we jumped into the conversation, we were talking about, like, what me to exemplify, like, one of my own breakdowns, right? Somewhere where I've had a real rough go. Mine really actually started, the pinnacle that I kind of always talk about, although there's probably been, I'm sure there's many more, but this is the one that was my breaker for me. I moved here 3.5 years ago. About 6 months after we moved, filed for divorce. And what I recognized in that time frame is how incredibly unhappy I was. But then I also, more so, I didn't know who I was. So I defined who I was by all of the titles, by the work that I had performed up to that point. That I was a wife, that I was a mother. Now I was still remain a mother, but I didn't know who I was. I certainly didn't know how, and what it all came down to when I ripped all the stuff back of all the things that I thought I was meant to be. I was meant to be a mom. I was meant to be this career person. I was meant to all of these things, to recognizing that how much of that was mine? What is my dream? What is my goal? How do I want to show up? Who am I? And how can I love and honor myself?
Yeah.
And taking that external and then pouring it back in. Like, selfish is one of my most favorite words now.
I love it. Yeah.
Because no one else is going to love you the way you get to love you. So you start to show up in that way, and you really honor who you are, then, and only then, can you be open to receiving the love that you deserve, because you're teaching other people how to interact with you.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And I that's a brilliant way to end this too. How you've been able to transform that, but also we can see it, we can feel it. And you're demonstrating, you're talking the talk and you're walking the walk, right? And so I think that's brilliant. And looking at, and I think it always goes back to love. As I was previously trained as a therapist, and we always talked about the onion, peeling the onion.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I always ask people, like, what's in the middle of an onion? And so
the gooey center.
I know, right? But one of my good friends, it's actually, this picture is in my book. In the back of it, my girlfriend sent me a picture. She had opened up a purple onion, and inside the onion, in the middle, it was a heart. And so I have this picture of this onion, and it's a heart. And I think, oh my goodness, it's all about love, right? It's all about going back to that center. And so we're peeling onion to get to the center. We're transforming whatever that hurt, whatever that avoid, whatever that darkness was, transforming it into love. And then when I see the picture in a different way, it's like, gosh, when I have all that love inside, then I radiate out from each of those layers, right? And then we can be the change in the world, really, like by going in and doing the work that we need to do, we get to have a bigger impact. And we automatically, as you said, we get to have permission to give other people permission to do the same. And I
Yeah.
think that's where the transformation, and I think that's where, the light workers of the world are really stepping up and stepping out to be heard, to be seen, to be, to really transform what is happening on, even in the backdrop of what, this conversation, really having that conversation around, it starts with us. It starts with us and it starts within. And that is not being selfish whatsoever. That is, being a greater contribution, I believe.
Yeah. I want to take this one thing. I know we're running to wrap up, but I wanted to share, I'm going to share this on screen with you.
Yeah.
This is my book, Break Down the Way About
Fantastic.
Journey Beyond the Now. But the reason I actually bring this up, yes, I will plug the book for sure. But what I really want to exemplify is the cover art. So if you can see it, I don't know how closely.
Oh yeah, it's a heart. It's a heart that's
It's
like
an exploding heart.
Yeah.
It's an exploding heart, and it was very intentional. Like that was the view I had of it when I started this whole writing process. Because when you talk about the onion, when you have that love from within and you can radiate it out, it's like the same thing. When we're loving ourselves, we can explode and share that from a place of abundance. And there are times where we have to, when the heart contracts, we contract those pieces back into ourselves as we continue to learn to love on ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's that constant, that continuous heartbeat.
I love it. What a perfect way to end the day. So let's share with people, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So best way to find me is at jocelynbellows.com. That's where you can find information about my coaching program. I work with men and women on love and relationships, on breaking through their BS. And also now this is actually the newest asset in my repertoire is writing coaching. As I've continued to work with more and more clients on helping them to find their voice. And also come March, and I don't know if we've already talked about this. So in March, the second week in March, I'm sorry, I don't have the date readily in front of me. Second week in March, we'll be launching Find Your Voice. It's going to be a 6-week program with myself and a very dear friend of mine. And we're going to talk about our strengths, using StrengthsFinder to understand what your strengths are and how you utilize those and leverage those strengths to write effectively and efficiently and be able to use your voice and share your voice with the world.
I love it. We'll be putting that information down in the show notes. What a delight. Thank you, Jocelyn. And I know that we're going to continue this conversation offline as well. Yeah. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am so grateful that you joined me for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, then there's just one thing that I would like you to do. Click to subscribe and leave me a rating and review. As my way to thank you, let's connect for a free consultation. Just reach out to me at talkingwithteri, that's TERI.com, to book your time.